Something inhuman has come to Tarker Mills, as unseen as the full moon riding the night sky high above. It's the werewolf, and there is no more reason now for its coming than there would be for the arrival of cancer, or a psychopath with murder on his mind, or a killer tornado. Its time is now, its place is here in this little Maine town where baked bean church suppers are weekly events, where small boys and girls still bring apples to their teacher, where the nature outings of the Senior Citizens Club are religiously reported in the weekly paper. Next week, there will be news of a darker variety. Outside, the tracks begin to fill up with snow, and the shriek of the wind seems savage with pleasure. There is nothing of God or light in this heartless sound. It's all black winter and dark ice. The cycle of the werewolf has begun. Oh, I'm supposed to be reviewing this. Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf, which was the basis for the movie Silver Bullet. A very interesting and unique book for Stephen King. It's remarkably small, and in some ways it's almost written in the style of a child's book. It even has beautiful illustrations, but the content is not child friendly. Each chapter, if you want to call it that, begins showing the month, and that's the book. It highlights one full moon during each month of the calendar year, and then after that you get a pencil sketch, and then the artwork by Bernie Wrightson of Swamp Thing. In this artwork, up front, I'm going to say, when I read a Stephen King book, his artwork is my imagination's reference point for what the world should look like when I'm visualizing things in my head. And you even get one more little pencil sketch at the end. The book barely has a central character, although you can argue Marty is, but he's only in a few chapters. And it's not even about the werewolf, as the part of the book I read mentions, and it talks about the town, and that's what it's about. It's about the town, about the people of the town, about the victims. Each month, with the exception of a couple, we get to know these victims, or in the one month, we get to know a few different people in the town. We get to know a little bit about who these victims are in a really good way. With the minimal time King had for each chapter, he does give us a great sense of who these people are. And that's a testament to strong writing. Not every artist could do that. Author could do that. But Stephen King pulled it off expertly. And it does build great tension for when the werewolf's going to show up, what he's going to do. And, Vulture Kite, pretty neat callback to Pet Sematary, because that's the kite that Lewis got for Gage, was a vulture kite. And we do get to know who the werewolf is later on, and it's something that's not really important. But it is also important because, again, it's about the people. There are only 2.5 ways to do a werewolf story. The guy knows he's a wolf, is terrified by it, hates what he's doing. He's just as much a victim as the people he kills when he's the wolf. The second the guy knows he's the wolf and embraces it, loves that he gets to get loose and kill. And the half away is the guy doesn't know he's a wolf, but at some point he has to become aware, and he can only go one of two ways, and we get to know the wolf. And if you've seen the movie, you know who the wolf is, but I'm not going to say it for people who haven't read the story or seen the movie. But he has to go one of two ways, and this is handled really interestingly, where as he finds out, we get to see his thought process. The closest thing this story has to a central character is Martin Coslaw, a boy in a wheelchair, who encounters the wolf on the 4th of July and puts its eye out with some fireworks. And again, this artwork is just gorgeous. This book is almost worth getting just for the artwork. So many of these images would look great just on a wall. And after he encounters the wolf, he's out for a chapter because don't get to see because his parents sent him off to stay with relatives in another state for a while. And it does build some more suspension until we find out who the wolf is on Halloween night when he's trick-or-treating. It's the one image I'm not going to show you in here because, again, I don't want to spoil it. And when the werewolf's not killing people, there's one night where he kills a farmer's all his pigs, and that scene's really well done. It talks about how he hears his pigs screaming, he gets his gun, his wife tries to stop him. He's like, nothing's gonna make me not go. And when they hear the howl of the wolf, he freezes in fear and doesn't go outside. And it talks about how they just sit there paralyzed in fear. And that's a really spooky, well done chapter that builds a lot of tension. And that's just how the book goes. You meet random characters. It has some more of the Stephen King elements where the monster isn't necessarily the biggest monster in the book. There's a character who's a chronic wife beater who has his wife, as the book calls it, living in a marital war zone. Which is always... It's interesting. I love how King does that. How he manages to make humans that in some ways are bigger monsters than whatever the monster is. And you see elements of that in here. As far as... And yes, if you've seen Mike's book club, pulling this from him, he talks about multiverse connections because all of Stephen King's books are connected through the Dark Tower and the multiverse. I'm not going to get into what a multiverse is. I don't have time for it. If you're a comic book fan, you know full and well multiverse, infinite different worlds. Some can have slight differences, some major. So that's how The Stand can exist side by it or even Under the Dome. Which, speaking of Under the Dome, this is set in Tarker's Mills. Under the Dome is set in Chester Mills, and in Under the Dome, it references Tarker Mills and says that they're sometimes known as the Twin Mills. So that's your multiverse connection to Under the Dome, as well as just a vulture kite, which isn't even a connection. It's just a slight nod of the hat. I would recommend getting this book. In fact, if you have like maybe a 14 or 15-year-old who's interested into getting into Stephen King, this would be a great starting point. Very short, not much time to invest, and it's something that's easy to pick up and read multiple times because you don't have to invest a whole lot of time in it. Where when you get a book, this isn't a Stephen King one, but I'm going to use it as an example. As thick as this is, like, it's not something you're going to read multiple times because you have to invest the time into a bigger, thicker story. But again, that's one of the little charms of Cycle of the Werewolf, is that it is just such a tiny, self-contained story, and just the way it's written. Each chapter focuses on the full moon on one calendar month, and we see how it affects the town throughout the year. It's intriguing. I've heard this story doesn't really break new ground. First of all, not every story has to break new ground as long as you do what you do really well, and this does. And in some ways, I would argue it does break new ground because I'm not really familiar of many werewolf stories that are about the people more than anything else. So in that way, yeah, it kind of does. A plus story. This is my third favorite King story after Under the Dome and Salem's Lot. It's a very cheap book. You can get it for about $15. So like, share, comment, subscribe. Over and out.